It was brought to the community's attention by Rex Zimmerman, the editor of the Kiowa News, publishing an article about an ongoing county investigation of the rumored misappropriation of funds by Kiowa's Barber County Ambulance Service, mentioning the names of Bev and Lonnie Williams, the Williams directing the ambulance operation from their residence. It was common knowledge the ambulance service was more or less a family endeavor. The two Williams, their son Monty, Bev's sister Doris, her husband Ed Herman, along with good family friend Billy Duvall, and the assistance of the Kiowa Hospital nursing staff. The article projecting a possibility the ambulance service might be removed from a Kiowa location, and all emergency service dispatched from Medicine Lodge. The Kiowa News publishing a notice about a public meeting at the Kiowa Hospital to discuss a resolution. The event finding hospital administrator Buck McKinney, a Barber County representative, Lonnie, Bev, the ambulance personnel and several other concerned citizens in attendance, including Gary's wife Jan. The corollary was to cement the ambulance's Kiowa location and if it would make a difference, Lonnie and Bev's offering to step down as ambulance management. Buck McKinney stating he was willing to accept responsibility as ambulance director, and have the total ambulance operation managed and dispatched from the hospital. It was acknowledged that there would be a transition period, and the Barber County representative dictating the need for additional ambulance personnel. The following week, a notice was published in the Kiowa News soliciting persons interested in a EMS position, and enrollment in an accelerated EMT class, also as an ambulance driver. A very concerned Jan Wilson enrolling in the EMT program. Gary having thoughts, but considering his 12 hours days for the school, having no desire to inoculate himself into the world of emergency response. Then unexpectedly answering a request to assist the evening EMT class as a responsive victim for instructional purpose. Notwithstanding he was exposed to the modus operandi of the ambulance service, noting it normally operated with a 3-person crew on emergency runs. A combination of 2 EMTs or RNs and a driver, the on-call responders scheduled for a 12-hour shift with a 5-minute response time. Gary's attendances assisting the class began to dwell on his conscience, discovering his school bus defensive driving course, First Aid and Class B driver's license fulfilled the prerequisites for an ambulance driver. The inevitable happened. He soon found his name on the monthly ambulance schedule as a driver, while Jan continued her EMT training. The new driver keeping abreast of his wife's accelerated EMT class, the 150-hour course normally spanning upwards of 90 days, depending on the instructor. The Kiowa class completing it in less than 6 weeks. Upon its conclusion, the group journeying to the Kansas Emergency Medical Service Center in Wichita for their written and the 5-station practical tests. Gary's interest peaked knowing the intensity and dedication his wife exhibited to obtain her goal, and shared Jan's anxiety waiting for the notification letter from the KEMS. The letter with the test results having arrived, Jan and just one other of the 7 applicants passing, which they were told was not unusual. Gary was aware the scheduling and hours with the ambulance service were in conflict with his school hours and bus driving duty, but with some unexpected assistance, resolved both. Glenn Piper granting Gary permission to take call during his school hours on the condition he notify Judy Rocket if he had to leave. The other conflict was concerning his bus route, and resolved by Hospital Director of Nursing Sharon Reagan, who graciously offered to cover Gary's ambulance calls when he was on his school bus route. Gary wasn't alone with his EMS schedule conflicting with his workday hours, Jan employment at the bank sometimes finding her name on ambulance call for a day shift. But Marvin Ott the bank president making allowances for her also to take call. It was a Saturday morning when the handheld ambulance radio broke the silence. "Kiowa ambulance, we have a call." The adrenaline kicked in. It was Gary's first run as a driver. He was on call with Doris and Ed Herman, but what added to his concern was the weather. Kiowa was in the midst of an ice storm. Gary pulling the ambulance out of the shed, the roads covered with patches of slick black ice, the conditions dictating a slow response, the driver feeling handcuffed. Red lights and siren at 35 miles per hour. An arrival in Hartna, entering the caller's home. A dimly lit, small two-bedroom house, cluttered and reeking with the smell of a badly vented gas heater. Directed to a bedroom. Doris and Ed checking on the unresponsive elderly man, immediately determining he had expired. The wife insisting she wanted him removed from the house right now. Doris calmly explaining they were not authorized to transport him, but would place a call, and in all probability have to wait until the coroner arrived before notifying the funeral home for transport. Gary finding the wife's non-grievous deportment somewhat puzzling, but it wasn't for him to judge. Doris taking the situation in stride, calling the hospital, finding that Dr. Chris had arrived. Explaining the situation to Chris, who said the subject was his patient, and because of the road conditions, rather than calling the coroner and the funeral home for pickup, the ambulance could transport the deceased to the hospital where he would sign off, stating the patient expired during transport, and they could continue on to the funeral home. The trip back to the hospital was uneventful, Dr. Chris meeting them at the hospital's rear ER entrance door. A call placed to the Fisher Funeral Home, notifying Bertie Fisher about the deceased, and that the ambulance would transport. Gary's inaugural ambulance run. A first-hand introduction to another world, the world of EMS, emergency medical service.